The grand ballroom of Buckingham Palace sparkled under crystal chandeliers as hundreds of distinguished guests gathered for the annual Royal Charity Gala. Princess Charlotte, now 12 years old, stood beside her parents, Prince William and Princess Catherine, watching the elegant crowd with curious eyes. The young princess wore a beautiful navy blue dress that her mother had carefully selected, her hair perfectly styled with a delicate tiara that once belonged to her great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. Charlotte had always been known for her strong personality within the royal family. Unlike her older brother George, who was naturally quiet and reserved, Charlotte possessed a fierce independence that both impressed and occasionally worried the palace staff. She asked questions that adults found difficult to answer, challenged traditions that seemed unfair to her young mind, and never hesitated to speak her truth, even when it made others uncomfortable. As the evening progressed, Charlotte watched the familiar royal protocols unfold around her. She observed how guests bowed deeply to her grandfather, King Charles, and how even the most important people in British society showed their respect through these ancient customs. The young princess had been taught these traditions since she could walk, understanding that respect and hierarchy were fundamental pillars of the monarchy that had sustained the royal family for over 1,000 years. Queen Camilla arrived fashionably late, as was her custom, wearing an elaborate emerald green gown that commanded attention from everyone in the room. The queen consort moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting the bows and curtsies that came naturally to those familiar with royal protocol. Her jewelry sparkled magnificently under the bright lights, and her confident demeanor showed years of experience in these formal royal settings. Charlotte watched as guest after guest approached Queen Camilla, each performing the traditional bow or curtsy that protocol demanded. She noticed how her father William nodded respectfully to his stepmother, and how even her mother Catherine offered a polite curtsy when they crossed paths near the refreshment table. The young princess had performed these same gestures countless times before, understanding that showing respect to senior royals was simply part of royal life. However, something felt different tonight. Charlotte found herself questioning why these particular traditions existed and whether they still held meaning in the modern world. She had recently been studying history at school, learning about how societies changed over time and how people fought for equality and justice. These lessons had planted seeds of curiosity in her young mind about the world beyond palace walls. As the evening continued, Charlotte engaged in polite conversation with various guests, displaying the charm and intelligence that had made her a favorite among royal watchers worldwide. She spoke confidently about her charitable interests, particularly her passion for environmental conservation and animal welfare, causes that resonated deeply with people her age across Britain and beyond. The palace staff moved efficiently through the crowd, ensuring that every guest felt welcomed and that the evening proceeded without any disruptions. Lord Chamberlain Matthews, a distinguished man in his 60s who had served the royal family for decades, kept a watchful eye on the younger royals, knowing that their behavior would be scrutinized by the media and public the following day. Charlotte's governess, Mrs. Henderson, had spent weeks preparing the young princess for this evening, reviewing proper etiquette and protocol. Mrs. Henderson was a kind but firm woman who understood the delicate balance between allowing Charlotte to develop her own personality while ensuring she understood her responsibilities as a member of the royal family. Royal Guard Captain James Morrison stood at his assigned position near the main entrance, his ceremonial uniform immaculate, and his attention focused on the security of the event. Captain Morrison had served in the British Army for 15 years before joining the Royal Protection Detail, and his dedication to the royal family was absolute. He had watched Charlotte grow from a curious toddler into an intelligent young woman, and he admired her spirit and determination. The evening's entertainment included a performance by the London Symphony Orchestra, whose beautiful music filled the ballroom and created an atmosphere of elegance and sophistication. Charlotte loved music and found herself swaying slightly to the melodies, momentarily forgetting about the formal protocols that surrounded her. As dinner was announced, the royal family members were escorted to the head table, where they would dine with the evening's most honored guests. Charlotte took her assigned seat between her brother George and a prominent charity director, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes watching her every move. She understood that as a member of the royal family, her behavior would be analyzed and discussed in newspapers and social media the following morning. The conversation at dinner was lively and engaging, covering topics from environmental conservation to youth education programs. Charlotte contributed thoughtfully to the discussions, impressing the adults around her with her knowledge and maturity. However, beneath her polite exterior, the young princess continued to wrestle with questions about tradition, hierarchy, and what it truly meant to serve the people of Britain. During the meal, Charlotte overheard snippets of conversation from nearby tables about the changing role of the monarchy in modern society. Some guests spoke about the need for the royal family to evolve and become more accessible to ordinary people, while others defended the importance of maintaining centuries-old traditions that gave the monarchy its dignity and authority. These conversations sparked something within Charlotte's mind. She began to think about her future role in the royal family and what kind of princess she wanted to become. Would she simply follow the path laid out for her by tradition, or would she find ways to bring her own values and beliefs into her royal duties? The questions seemed too big for someone her age, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that important decisions lay ahead. As the evening progressed toward its conclusion, Charlotte noticed that Queen Camilla was making her way around the room, personally thanking key guests for their attendance and support. The young princess knew that protocol would soon require her to approach her step-grandmother and offer the traditional curtsy that showed respect for Camilla's position as queen consort. Charlotte watched as other family members completed this ritual without question, their movements automatic and practiced. She had performed the same gesture hundreds of times before, understanding it as simply another part of royal life. However, tonight felt different. Tonight, the weight of tradition seemed heavier, and the questions in her young mind seemed more urgent and demanding of answers. The moment was approaching when Charlotte would need to decide how she would greet Queen Camilla. The choice seemed simple on the surface, yet the young princess sensed that this decision might represent something much larger than a simple gesture of respect. In her heart, she felt the beginning of what would become a defining moment in her young life, though she couldn't yet understand the full implications of what was about to unfold. The ballroom continued to buzz with conversation and laughter, unaware that a 12-year-old princess was grappling with questions that would soon challenge the very foundations of royal protocol and tradition. The moment arrived sooner than Charlotte had expected. Queen Camilla approached the area where the younger royals were gathered, her emerald gown rustling softly against the marble floor. The conversations around them gradually quieted as people noticed the queen consort's approach, creating an atmosphere of respectful anticipation that Charlotte could feel settling over the room like a heavy blanket. Charlotte's heart began beating faster as she watched Camilla move closer. The young princess felt her palms growing damp inside her white gloves, and she struggled to understand why this familiar routine suddenly felt so complicated and overwhelming. She had curtsied to Queen Camilla countless times before, yet tonight something deep within her questioned whether she should continue following this tradition without understanding its true meaning and purpose. George, standing beside his sister, prepared to offer his customary bow to their step-grandmother. He had always been comfortable with royal protocols, finding comfort in their predictability and structure. George glanced at Charlotte, expecting her to prepare for the traditional curtsy that everyone anticipated. However, he noticed something different in his sister's expression, a look of uncertainty and internal conflict that he had never seen before. Princess Catherine watched her children carefully, her maternal instincts alert to any signs of discomfort or confusion. She noticed Charlotte's hesitation and felt a flutter of concern in her chest. Catherine understood her daughter's independent nature and had always admired Charlotte's willingness to think for herself, but she also knew that royal protocol existed for important reasons and that deviation from tradition could create uncomfortable situations for everyone involved. Prince William stood nearby, engaged in conversation with several government ministers, but his attention was partially focused on his family. William had learned from his own childhood experiences about the challenges of growing up in the royal spotlight, and he tried to give his children space to develop their own personalities while ensuring they understood their responsibilities to the crown and the people they served. Queen Camilla reached their small group with a warm smile, her years of experience in royal settings evident in her graceful demeanor. She had worked hard to build positive relationships with all members of the royal family, particularly the younger generation, understanding that their acceptance was crucial for the monarchy's future stability and public support. "Good evening, children," Camilla said in her familiar, refined voice, her tone warm but carrying the authority that came with her position as queen consort. "I hope you're enjoying this wonderful evening. The charity has done such important work this year, and events like this help ensure they can continue making a difference in people's lives." George immediately stepped forward and offered a perfect bow, his movements smooth and practiced. "Good evening, Your Majesty," he said politely, using the formal address that protocol required. "The evening has been lovely, thank you." Camilla smiled approvingly at George's proper behavior, then turned her attention to Charlotte, expecting the same respectful response that had become routine in their family interactions. The queen consort's expression was kind but expectant, and Charlotte could feel the weight of that expectation pressing down on her young shoulders. Charlotte stood motionless for a moment that seemed to stretch much longer than it actually lasted. She looked directly at Queen Camilla, her young mind racing through all the questions that had been building throughout the evening. Why should she bow to someone simply because of their title? What made one person more deserving of respect than another? Were these traditions helping or hindering the royal family's connection with ordinary people? The silence began to feel uncomfortable as those nearby noticed Charlotte's hesitation. Several guests glanced in their direction, sensing that something unusual was happening, but unable to understand exactly what was causing the delay. The background conversations grew quieter as more people became aware of the tension developing in their small corner of the ballroom. Catherine took a small step toward her daughter, her expression gentle but concerned. "Charlotte, dear," she said quietly, hoping to prompt her daughter without creating a scene that would draw unwanted attention from the assembled guests and any media representatives who might be present. However, Charlotte had reached a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of performing the expected curtsy, she stood straight and tall, looking Queen Camilla directly in the eyes. "Good evening, Camilla," she said clearly, using Camilla's first name rather than the formal title that protocol demanded. "I hope you're having a pleasant evening." The words hung in the air like a challenge to centuries of royal tradition. Charlotte's decision to address the queen consort by her first name, without the customary curtsy, represented a break from protocol that no one had anticipated. The young princess felt a mixture of fear and liberation as she realized she had crossed a line that might have serious consequences. Queen Camilla's expression showed surprise and perhaps a hint of displeasure, though she quickly composed herself with the skill that came from decades of navigating difficult social situations. She understood that Charlotte was still young and might be going through a phase of questioning authority, something that many children experienced as they developed their own sense of identity and independence. "I see," Camilla replied carefully, her voice maintaining its pleasant tone despite the obvious breach of protocol. "Yes, it has been a lovely evening, Charlotte. The music was particularly beautiful, don't you think?" Charlotte nodded, appreciating that Camilla was attempting to move past the awkward moment without creating a larger confrontation. However, the young princess also felt disappointed that her gesture of independence was being dismissed rather than acknowledged as a legitimate expression of her feelings about royal hierarchy and tradition. The people standing nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances, uncertain how to react to what they had just witnessed. Some understood that Charlotte was still learning royal protocol, and might simply have forgotten the proper procedure in the excitement of the evening. Others recognized that the young princess had made a deliberate choice that challenged fundamental aspects of royal tradition. Lord Chamberlain Matthews, who had been observing from across the room, noticed the unusual interaction and began moving discreetly in their direction. His extensive experience with royal protocol told him that the situation needed to be managed carefully to prevent any embarrassment for the royal family or their distinguished guests. Captain Morrison, from his position near the entrance, had also noticed the commotion and felt his protective instincts activate. While he couldn't hear the specific words being exchanged, his trained eye could read body language well enough to understand that some kind of protocol issue was developing. The captain's loyalty to the royal family, particularly to the younger generation, made him feel protective of Charlotte even when she might be making mistakes. Catherine placed a gentle hand on Charlotte's shoulder, attempting to guide her daughter toward a more appropriate response. "Perhaps you'd like to try that greeting again, sweetheart," she suggested quietly, hoping to give Charlotte an opportunity to correct her behavior without drawing more attention to the situation. But Charlotte felt that backing down now would betray the principle she was just beginning to understand and embrace. She had made her choice based on her growing belief that respect should be earned through actions rather than automatically granted because of titles or positions. The young princess understood that she might face consequences for her decision, but she felt that standing by her convictions was more important than avoiding temporary discomfort. "I meant what I said, Mummy," Charlotte replied quietly, but firmly, looking up at her mother with eyes that showed both determination and uncertainty. "I think we should treat people with respect because of who they are, not because of their titles." The simple statement carried profound implications for royal protocol and tradition. Charlotte's words suggested that she was questioning not just this particular moment, but the entire system of hierarchy and automatic deference that formed the foundation of monarchy. Her young voice had articulated a challenge that philosophers and political theorists had debated for centuries. The tension in the ballroom reached a critical point as Charlotte's words settled over the small group. Queen Camilla's composure remained intact, but those familiar with royal protocol understood that a significant boundary had been crossed. The queen consort had dedicated years to earning her place within the royal family, and this public challenge from a 12-year-old princess represented more than simple childhood defiance. Lord Chamberlain Matthews arrived at the group, just as the situation was becoming increasingly uncomfortable for everyone involved. His decades of experience managing delicate royal situations told him that immediate action was necessary to prevent the incident from escalating into a public spectacle that could damage the monarchy's reputation and create lasting family tensions. "Your Royal Highness," Matthews addressed Charlotte with practiced diplomacy, "perhaps we might continue this conversation in a more private setting where we can discuss these important questions about protocol and tradition more thoroughly." Charlotte looked up at the distinguished older man, recognizing his attempt to remove her from the situation without causing further embarrassment. However, the young princess felt that being shuffled away would send the wrong message about the importance of her concerns. She believed that questions about respect and equality deserved serious consideration, regardless of the setting in which they arose. "I appreciate your concern, Lord Chamberlain," Charlotte replied with remarkable composure for someone her age, "but I think these questions are important enough to address honestly, wherever they arise. If our traditions don't make sense to young people, shouldn't we talk about why that might be?" The boldness of Charlotte's response surprised everyone present, including her parents. Prince William stepped forward, realizing that his daughter's behavior was drawing attention from guests throughout the ballroom. While he admired Charlotte's independent thinking, he also understood the potential consequences of allowing this situation to continue developing in such a public forum. "Charlotte, I think Lord Chamberlain Matthews has made a reasonable suggestion," William said gently but firmly. "These are indeed important questions, and They deserve thoughtful discussion at an appropriate time and place. However, before anyone could take action to defuse the situation, Captain Morrison approached the group with confident strides. The royal guard had been watching from his position across the room, and his protective instincts had brought him to what he perceived as a potentially problematic situation developing around one of the young royals he was sworn to protect. Morrison's appearance immediately changed the dynamics of the confrontation. His imposing presence in full ceremonial uniform commanded respect from everyone present, and his reputation for unwavering loyalty to the royal family was well known throughout the palace. However, what happened next surprised everyone, including Morrison himself. Looking directly at Charlotte with obvious admiration, Captain Morrison executed a perfect military salute in her direction. The gesture was completely unexpected and represented a significant departure from normal protocol, since guards typically saluted senior royals, but not children, and certainly not in situations involving breaches of etiquette. "Your Royal Highness," Morrison said in his clear, authoritative voice, "I want you to know that asking important questions takes real courage. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stand up for what they believe is right, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable." The captain's words and actions created a moment of stunned silence throughout the immediate area. His support for Charlotte's position was unexpected and carried significant weight because of his respected status within the royal household. Morrison had essentially validated Charlotte's concerns about protocol and tradition, suggesting that her questions deserved serious consideration rather than automatic dismissal. Queen Camilla's expression showed clear displeasure at this development. The situation had evolved from a simple protocol violation into what appeared to be a coordinated challenge to her authority and position. The Queen Consort understood that Morrison's intervention had transformed a manageable family issue into something that could have broader implications for royal hierarchy and discipline. "Captain Morrison," Camilla said with controlled authority, "I believe your responsibilities lie in ensuring security, not in commenting on matters of royal protocol and family relationships." Morrison maintained his respectful posture while standing firm in his position. "Your Majesty, my primary responsibility is indeed security, but that includes protecting all members of the royal family, including their right to express themselves and ask questions about their roles and responsibilities." The exchange between Morrison and Camilla created an unprecedented situation in the ballroom. A royal guard was openly disagreeing with the Queen Consort in defense of a young princess's right to question traditional protocol. The incident was rapidly becoming the kind of dramatic moment that royal watchers and media outlets would analyze and discuss for years to come. Charlotte felt a surge of gratitude toward Captain Morrison for understanding and supporting her position. The young princess had felt isolated in her questioning of royal traditions, assuming that adults would automatically side with established protocol regardless of whether it made sense to younger generations. Morrison's support gave her the confidence to continue standing by her convictions. "Thank you, Captain Morrison," Charlotte said with genuine appreciation. "I'm glad someone understands that asking questions doesn't mean being disrespectful. I've been wondering whether our traditions help us serve people better, or whether some of them might actually create barriers between the royal family and the people we're supposed to represent." The sophistication of Charlotte's reasoning impressed even those who disagreed with her actions. The young princess was clearly grappling with complex issues about leadership, service, and the role of monarchy in modern society. Her questions went far beyond simple childhood rebellion and touched on fundamental issues that the royal family would eventually need to address as society continued to evolve. Prince William found himself in an extremely difficult position as Charlotte's father and as a future king. He could see validity in his daughter's concerns about the relevance of certain royal traditions. Yet he also understood that the monarchy's stability depended on maintaining respect for established protocols and hierarchy. The situation required delicate handling to avoid damaging family relationships while preserving institutional authority. Catherine watched her daughter with mixed emotions of pride and concern. She admired Charlotte's courage and intelligence, recognizing that the young princess was developing into a thoughtful individual who wouldn't simply accept authority without question. However, Catherine also worried about the potential consequences of this public challenge to Queen Camilla and established royal protocols. The guests throughout the ballroom had become increasingly aware that something significant was happening near the royal family's table. Conversations grew quieter as people strained to understand the nature of the disturbance, and several individuals discreetly moved closer to get a better view of the developing situation. Mrs. Henderson, Charlotte's governess, felt a mixture of responsibility and bewilderment as she watched her charge navigate this complex situation. She had worked hard to prepare Charlotte for royal life while encouraging the young princess's natural curiosity and independence. However, she hadn't anticipated that Charlotte would choose such a public moment to challenge fundamental aspects of royal protocol. The orchestra, seemingly oblivious to the drama unfolding across the room, continued playing elegant classical pieces that provided an incongruous soundtrack to the tension developing among the royal family members. The beautiful music seemed to emphasize the contrast between the evening's intended atmosphere of harmony and celebration and the actual conflict that was dividing the most important guests. As the standoff continued, it became clear that this moment would have lasting consequences for everyone involved. Charlotte had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Morrison had taken a position that challenged established authority structures, and the royal family would need to find a way to address the underlying issues that had created this confrontation. The young princess stood her ground, supported by an unexpected ally, while facing the disapproval of senior family members and the uncertainty of an audience that didn't fully understand what they were witnessing. The evening had transformed from a routine charity gala into a defining moment that would influence Charlotte's relationship with royal tradition for years to come. The confrontation reached its climax as more guests became aware of the unusual situation developing among the royal family members. Whispered conversations spread throughout the ballroom as distinguished attendees tried to understand what was causing the obvious tension near the head table. The evening's carefully orchestrated atmosphere of elegance and harmony was giving way to an unprecedented display of generational conflict within the monarchy itself. Queen Camilla realized that the situation had progressed beyond a simple family disagreement and now threatened to become a public relations crisis that could damage the royal family's reputation. Her years of experience dealing with media scrutiny told her that every word and gesture in this moment would be analyzed and reported in newspapers and social media around the world within hours. "I think this conversation has gone quite far enough," Camilla said with firm authority, her patience clearly strained by the prolonged challenge to her position. "Charlotte, you will show proper respect immediately, or there will be serious consequences for your behavior this evening." The ultimatum hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down between the generations. Charlotte felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her young shoulders as she realized that her next words and actions would determine not only the immediate outcome of this confrontation, but potentially her future relationship with royal tradition and family hierarchy. Captain Morrison stepped slightly closer to Charlotte, his protective instincts fully activated by what he perceived as an unfair pressure being placed on a child who was simply trying to understand her place in the world. The veteran guard had served in combat situations where split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death, and his instincts told him that Charlotte needed support in this crucial moment. "Your Majesty," Morrison addressed Camilla with respectful but unwavering determination. "Princess Charlotte is asking legitimate questions about traditions that will shape her entire life. Perhaps instead of demanding immediate compliance, we might consider whether her concerns deserve thoughtful consideration." Morrison's continued support for Charlotte created a ripple of shock through the nearby guests who could hear the exchange. A royal guard openly questioning the queen consort's authority was unprecedented in modern royal history, and everyone present understood they were witnessing something that would be discussed and debated for years to come. Prince William stepped between Morrison and Camilla, recognizing that the situation was spiraling beyond anyone's control. As the future king, he understood that his response to this crisis would set important precedents for how the monarchy handled internal disagreements and generational conflicts in the future. Captain Morrison, I appreciate your dedication to my daughter's well-being, William said carefully, but this is a family matter that we need to resolve together. I'm sure you understand. Morrison nodded respectfully to the prince, but maintained his protective stance near Charlotte. Of course, your royal highness. However, as someone sworn to protect all members of your family, I felt it was important to ensure that Princess Charlotte's perspective was heard and respected. Charlotte looked up at the adults surrounding her, feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of the situation she had created, but still determined to stand by her principles. The young princess had started this confrontation with simple questions about respect and tradition, but it had evolved into something much larger that seemed to involve the very future of how the royal family would navigate changing social expectations. I want everyone to understand, Charlotte said with a voice that carried despite her young age. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anyone. I'm trying to figure out how to be the kind of princess that makes sense in today's world. Sometimes I think our traditions help us serve people better, and sometimes I wonder if they create walls between us and the people we're supposed to represent. The maturity and sincerity of Charlotte's statement surprised many of the adults listening to her words. The young princess was clearly grappling with complex issues about leadership, service, and social responsibility that many adults struggled to understand fully. Her questions touched on fundamental challenges facing not just the British monarchy, but royal institutions around the world as they adapted to changing social expectations. Princess Catherine moved closer to her daughter, torn between admiration for Charlotte's courage and concern about the potential consequences of this very public challenge to royal authority. As someone who had married into the royal family as an adult, Catherine understood both the importance of respecting established traditions and the difficulties of adapting to institutional expectations that sometimes seemed outdated or irrelevant. Charlotte, darling, Catherine said gently, your questions are important, and we will definitely discuss them as a family. But this might not be the best time or place for such a significant conversation. However, Charlotte felt that backing down now would invalidate everything she had been trying to express about the importance of authentic communication and genuine respect. The young princess believed that if her concerns weren't worthy of discussion in public, then perhaps they weren't being taken seriously at all. Mummy, if these questions are only appropriate in private, doesn't that suggest there might be something wrong with the answers? Charlotte asked with the kind of logical clarity that children sometimes brought to complex adult issues. The question struck at the heart of the dilemma facing the royal family. If royal traditions couldn't withstand public scrutiny and discussion, what did that say about their relevance and validity in a democratic society that valued transparency and accountability? Charlotte's innocent question had exposed a fundamental tension between institutional authority and public accountability that the monarchy would need to address. King Charles, who had been engaged in conversation with government officials across the room, became aware of the developing situation and began moving toward his family. His approach created another layer of complexity as everyone present realized that the heir to the throne was about to become involved in what was already an unprecedented breach of royal protocol. Lord Chamberlain Matthews, recognizing that the situation required immediate management before it could escalate further, made a decisive intervention. Perhaps, he suggested diplomatically, we might arrange for a private family discussion tomorrow where these important questions can be explored more thoroughly, while allowing this evening's celebration to continue as planned. Charlotte looked around at the faces surrounding her, seeing a mixture of concern, frustration, support, and uncertainty reflected in their expressions. She realized that her simple refusal to curtsy had triggered a much larger conversation about respect, tradition, and the future of the monarchy that no one had been prepared to handle in such a public setting. Captain Morrison, understanding that his role in the situation had reached its natural conclusion, offered a final gesture of support. He approached Charlotte and spoke quietly enough that only she could hear his words. "Your Royal Highness," he said respectfully, "whatever happens next, you should know that asking difficult questions takes real courage. The best leaders are those who are willing to examine their own traditions and make thoughtful decisions about what serves their people best." Charlotte nodded gratefully to Morrison, feeling supported in her convictions, even as she realized that the immediate situation required some form of resolution that would allow everyone to move forward with dignity intact. The young princess had achieved her goal of raising important questions about royal tradition and respect, but she also understood that finding answers would require ongoing conversation rather than continued confrontation. Looking directly at Queen Camilla, Charlotte made a decision that surprised everyone present. Instead of offering the traditional curtsy that had started the entire confrontation, she extended her hand for a handshake, treating Camilla as an equal deserving of respect, but not automatic deference based solely on title or position. "Camilla," Charlotte said with quiet dignity, "I hope we can continue talking about these important questions in the future. I think we both want what's best for our family and our country, even if we have different ideas about how to achieve those goals." The gesture was unprecedented in royal protocol, but it carried a sincerity and maturity that impressed even those who disagreed with Charlotte's methods. The young princess had found a way to maintain her principles while offering a path forward that respected everyone's positions and preserved the possibility of future dialogue and understanding. Queen Camilla looked at the extended hand for a moment, realizing that her response would be remembered and analyzed by everyone present. After a brief pause, she shook Charlotte's hand, accepting the gesture as a sign of mutual respect between two individuals who had very different perspectives on tradition and authority. "Of course, Charlotte," Camilla replied with controlled grace. "These are indeed important questions that deserve thoughtful consideration." The handshake marked the end of the confrontation, though everyone present understood that the underlying issues would require much more extensive discussion and resolution in the days and weeks to come. Charlotte had successfully challenged royal protocol while maintaining her dignity and convictions, supported by an unexpected ally who understood that courage sometimes required standing up for principles even when it was difficult or uncomfortable. As the evening gradually returned to its original rhythm, Charlotte felt a mixture of exhaustion and accomplishment. She had learned important lessons about the complexity of leadership, the challenges of questioning established traditions, and the importance of finding allies who shared her commitment to authentic communication and genuine respect. The young princess knew that this evening would be remembered as a turning point in her understanding of her role within the royal family and her responsibilities to the people she would someday serve. The questions she had raised would continue to challenge and inspire her as she grew into her position as a modern royal in an ever-changing world.